Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to be checking out this video, why you don't matter anymore. Economically speaking, of course. This video is by How Money Works, and of course you do matter, and you should like, comment, and subscribe to prove that. And yeah, let's get right into it. As usual, the original video is going to be down in the description, so yeah, check it out.
Late last week, the US shocked economists with a report that contained results they were not really expecting. The economy had grown at a shocking 3.8% pace in the second quarter, seemingly putting to rest all of the concerns that the naysayers had about a softening job market, trade wars, the cost of living, skyrocketing defaults, declining labor force participation, sector-wide crises, and slowing productivity. Sounds great, right? Well,
I wonder what that 3% is. Is it just like 3% increase in the stock market where like the top 1% have just put a lot more money in, or something else? Let's see.
Well, as you might have already guessed, there is a lot to unpack from these numbers. GDP isn't a flawless measure, even in normal times, and I'm sure you have probably noticed there is a lot going on at the moment. But if you do what nobody else wants to do and actually read the data behind these figures, it tells three very interesting stories that challenges a lot of assumptions that we have about how our economy should work. This goes well beyond just simply growing inequality. That's not exactly shocking news anymore. But if you are looking for a sign of just how healthy and balanced the current market is, a new report has revealed that there are now more private equity firms in America than there are McDonald's. And the reason is very simple. If all of these numbers needed a headline, it would probably be, "You don't matter anymore." Economically speaking, of course.
Hey, that's the title of the video. Whoa!
GDP report showing that the U.S. economy expanded at 3.8%, surpassing the forecast growth of 3.3%.
36% of consumers say they've had trouble paying in just the last week, so that is up 25% compared to the same time period a year ago.
So you have to go to your landlord and say, I don't know how I'm going to pay you. I've never had to do that.
Trillions of dollars are pouring into the United States for investment purposes.
The U.S. economy.
I feel like those trillions of dollars are not going to the general people, but instead to just the very top, tiny, itsy-witsy, greedy percent. I feel like it. I'm actually not an American, if you couldn't tell. So it may seem like this doesn't really matter. Even if you're watching this and you're not American, you might think, oh, why does it matter that America is not doing so well financially? They are the economic superpower of the world. If their economy just shits itself tomorrow, we're all going to be eating like rice and living in cardboard boxes.
Economy grew faster than expected between April and June.
So yeah, that wasn't a typo. There are now 19,000 private equity funds in the US and only 14,000 McDonald's locations. The statistic was...
I thought there would be like just a tiny bit more. No, it's like damn near 20% more.
Originally highlighted by Elisa Wood, a partner at one of the biggest private equity firms in the world. Ironies aside though, the reason this is happening is because there is just more opportunity in serving investment products to a few thousand ultra high net worth individuals and institutions than there is in serving burgers to millions of everyday Americans. As an economic participant, you really only have three jobs as far as these numbers are concerned. You can work, you can invest, and you can consume. So do keep this in mind as we jump into the numbers, because there are really three big problems with a lot of our assumptions. The first problem is what this impressive economic growth figure is actually based on. GDP is normally calculated by summing together household consumption, investment, government spending, and exports, and then subtracting total imports. When the Bureau of Economic Analysis says that the economy is growing at 3.8%, they do this calculation for a quarter, compare the difference to last quarter, and then multiply it by 4 to get an annualized figure. If you are so inclined, they publish the individual breakdowns of all of these numbers, and if you did look closely at the most recent report, there is one number buried deep in the data that really puts this promising headline into perspective. In Q1 of this year, imports into America spiked by over 38% from the quarter before. This was mostly because big retailers wanted to stock up on inventory before tariffs took effect so they could remain cost competitive for a few more months. But in Q2, after they had already filled all of their warehouses, they didn't need to bring in more inventory from overseas, so imports dropped by over 29%. Now remember, when the economists do their calculations, they subtract imports. So on paper, a crash in import volume is actually good for GDP numbers.
So this is just like a falsely inflated number, the 3.8%, because this isn't real economic growth. So I wonder what it's going to be like in the next quarter or the quarter after that.
In reality, though, international trade swinging this wildly over 6 months in the biggest economy in the world is not great.
Yeah, just like what I was saying.
It gets worse. Within the same report, it is noted that this large drop in imports actually bolstered GDP by over 5%. What this means in plain English is that if we ignored the wild swings in import volumes, GDP would have actually shrunk by 1.2% at an annualized rate. Now, as a small little side note, 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth, I'm sure the comment section can tell you what that's an indication of.
Struggling farmers is a recession indicator. Damn, that looks like a recession indicator. Oh dear. I wonder where we're heading.
Now, you might think a little glitch in the reporting process still shouldn't have this much of an impact on the performance of the entire economy, right? And you would be absolutely correct. Over 2/3 of the American economy depends on just this part here. Personal consumption now accounts for 68% of all of our economic activity, well above most other advanced economies.
Damn, what was that spike at the beginning of, is it China? I wonder.
Which is clearly not ideal, but it has given us 2 pieces of false confidence. The first is that since so much of the economy relies on consumer spending, we can't let those consumers fall too far, or else there will be nobody left to sell stuff to, right? Wrong. I have mentioned this statistic before, but for those who haven't heard it, 50% of all consumer spending is now done by just the top 10% of households. Now, that's a scary statistic by itself, but what it doesn't mention is that the bottom 60% of households now collectively account for less than 20% of the spending, and a growing share of that is being supported by risky consumer debt. The companies that have been performing best over the last 5 years have been in industries catering to wealthy consumers or to investor hype. Ferrari is now worth twice as much as Honda, and even Walmart is changing its business model to cater to more upmarket shoppers.
If everyone caters to these, to like the richer people, then the poor people are just gonna not have anything. I guess that will open up like a blue ocean for new up-and-coming entrepreneurs to take advantage, like, let's offer like actually decent products at a cheap price to the wide masses, but this is definitely strange.
More than 200 million people could drastically cut their spending tomorrow, and the total drop in economic activity could be covered over by increased spending on things like AI. In fact, it's kind of already happening. Personal consumption contributed less to economic growth than data center construction in the last reported quarter, and a majority of that consumption was done by just 10% of households anyway. Steve Eisman of Big Short fame did an extended interview on this a few days ago, and it goes into depth on a lot of the specifics, so I will leave a link to that down below. But in brief,
if you want me to react to that, then, let me know down in the comments. I don't know if that'll be quite as interesting as reacting to, another one of his videos, How Money Works, but, let me know.
This is more than just regular old inequality. Today we have something arguably worse: indifference. The lords of old at least needed their serfs to keep their empire operating. Today, not so much. As far as the economy is concerned, your ability to be a good little consumer is just a rounding error. And that leaves only your ability to work and your ability to invest. So it's time to learn how money works to find out why you don't matter anymore to the economy. This week's video is sponsored by Gamma, the tool that's changing the way people build presentations and content.
If you want to use Gamma, check out the link down in the description. Hell yeah. Good stuff. Check it out.
And prepping for a client pitch. It can also personalize a presentation for different audiences or reframe your tone, from casual to executive ready instantly. It's like having an editor, researcher, and designer built into one tool. You can try Gamma and see what Agent can do for your workflow using the link in the description.
Hell yeah, check it out. This guy makes great stuff. He deserves it. He's got to farm up those sponsors. You know how it is.
About your relationship with the economy is that, yeah, sure, your success might not mean that much to the economy anymore. But the success of the economy also doesn't mean that much to you anymore. Over the last 40 years, personal productivity has doubled, even accounting for inflation. That means the average American is now producing twice as much as they were 40 years ago. And this has given even average people access to comforts, conveniences, and experiences that they just wouldn't have had back then. And yet, when asked, slightly more than half of you that responded still said you would prefer to live back then. So we are all remembering history through rose-tinted glasses, or has this doubling of economic output actually been totally irrelevant to average people? Well, as you might have guessed, our per capita production doubled, but incomes did not. Adjusted for inflation, median wages have increased by just 20% over the last 40 years, which is not great, but it's still not nothing. The median isn't skewed by the uber-rich like the average is, and that's 20% after inflation, so we should theoretically be 20% better off. And we are, but only in areas that don't really matter. Travel, technology, on-demand services, clothing, furnishes, and even food are all much more accessible today than they were back then, by a pretty wide margin. However, more essential items like housing, education, and healthcare have become far more expensive. So while you can, in theory, buy...
I'm so glad I don't live in a country with, like, insane hospital fees. We still have to pay some here, but, like, in America, you can get a snake bite and be thousands of dollars in debt. Like, I'm pretty sure a hospital ride is, like... an ambulance ride is, like, $6,000 or something like that. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
More stuff today with a perfectly middle-of-the-road income, it's not exactly the stuff that you need to build a comfortable life. The things that we wanted became cheaper, but the things that we needed fell out of reach. Which means, for a lot of people, their strongest tangible connection to economic prosperity is the car they are paying off over the next 84 months. But there is one much bigger factor which is a lot harder to capture with these numbers, and it's how people have earned that money. Your consumption may not matter to the overall economy, but the overall economy hasn't made it easy to consume the things you want. But something that has lost its relevance even faster is the work we are doing. 40 years ago, most jobs garnered far more respect from both employers and employees. Most workers in skilled or semi-skilled professions stayed with their employers for a long time, and laying off staff or getting fired was a massive deal. Today, losing your job at some point is the expectation. A lot of young workers treat it almost like a joke to make content out of, although this could be some kind.
From what I know, like, of course, I'm not in the working market. I haven't had 9 to 5 or anything like that. From what I know, the best strategy is to, like, work at a company for 2 years and then go talk to other companies, try to get, like, a raise or get a higher promotion or, you know, something like that, more money. And if your company says no, then you go to the other companies that are like, oh, wow, you've done great for this company. I'm sure you'll do great for us. And then you just keep getting more and more money or something. I've heard that's, like, the best strategy. If I do end up going into something like that, I guess I'll try to remember. But if you like, comment, and subscribe, then I'll be able to stay out of the rat race and hopefully take a few people with me. You know, yeah, please.
Kind of brain rot coping mechanism that I don't fully understand. Anyway, modern technologies have made a lot of jobs far more productive, but they have also made them far more user-friendly. As an example, a few decades ago, most large offices would have a small army of semi-skilled secretaries to put together presentations and information for reports. Something like making a graph in the prescribed...
Now you can just use Gamma down in his description, hell yeah.
...corporate style would take a lot of time, but also take some level of training to learn. Today, the company can just have an Excel template, and as long as someone can copy and paste 2 rows of data, they can do what used to be hours of work. Bank managers used to be highly respected professionals with a deep understanding of business finances, their local economy, and their extensive list of clients. Replacing one of these guys could take a full year of direct mentoring. Today, bank managers are glorified loan salesmen because credit reports and extensive electronic databases have taken the skill out of their jobs. Travel agents, junior analysts, stockbrokers, and an array of other jobs all mostly followed the same trend. These people became far more productive, but also far easier to replace. User-friendly and standardized technologies meant most people could get up to speed with a job within a week or two, as long as they knew how to use a suite of software. The promise or threat of AI, depending on who is asking, is that it could render your ability to work completely obsolete. But even if it simply continues this trend of standardizing roles, it will ultimately make workers more of a commodity that could be easily traded around an open market. Again, this raises the argument that if nobody can find a job anymore, then there will be nobody left to buy all of the stuff that companies are making. But once more, this is simply not true.
Really?
Profit-motivated companies aren't going to hand over their valuable resources for nothing in return. For normal people, what they typically exchange for those goods and services is the hours in their day through something like a job, a contract, or maybe even working in their own business. But if these working hours are no longer valued by the market, then over time, companies are just going to start selling their products to people who can get their money through their investments, kind of like what is happening right now. In some tragic irony, this trend has gone so far that even multimillionaires are being pushed out of coveted goods and services by billionaires with more purchasing power.
That's crazy that the rich have a wealth gap as well. How fucking far is the top, like, 0.1%? And I did a video on this. it'll probably be up in a couple of days. You should go take a look.
I appreciate that because people don't think about the
Oh yeah, but the answer is the top 1% have 40% of the wealth, which, yeah, anyway.
millionaires, right? Like, we get lumped in with the billionaires, but the millionaires really have it rough. Why are you guys saying f you?
Alright, so your consumption and your labor might not matter to the economy, but what about your ability to invest? It sounds like things are pretty sweet for those guys, right? Well, yes. Except for the fact that investments into productive capital, like all of the technology that's making you really easy to replace, is even more consolidated than consumption and income. Increased high-interest consumer debt also makes a lot of investing done by everybody else counterproductive. According to data from the Fed, the top 10% of households own more than 93% of corporate equities in America, but those same households only account for 5.4% of non-mortgage consumer debt. It's great that more people are getting into the market.
Yeah, this is literally just the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and the gap is going to keep widening until we have some sort of breaking point. And right now, from what I've seen in the US, y'all are on like the verge of a revolution or something like that, because tensions are so high, people are getting desperate, really desperate, and it is very unfortunate. So
but if you're paying off a 20% APR car loan and putting $500 a month into Robinhood, you are not an investor. You are just really bad at allocating capital. Now, what all of this means is that most economic participants don't really participate in their own economy. In the past, when average people struggled, the economy struggled, and wealthy people riding on that economy struggled too. Today, we could very well be in a situation where the majority make up such an insignificant share of market activity that even severe problems for them can be effectively drowned out by the party being had by a very small handful of people. Now, as far as social cohesion is concerned, this isn't great. But for the economy, it gets worse. We could see a situation where unemployment rises dramatically, but the economy continues to grow, because all of those laid off people didn't contribute much to overall consumption or investment. In that case, taking action like lowering interest rates or giving out stimulus to help the unemployed would risk further inflating already overinflated asset markets that didn't feel the pain to begin with, which would only make this problem even worse. Even the Fed essentially admitted that it was increasingly hard to enact policy that would help ordinary workers without helping out wealthy asset owners even more. But it gets worse. Average people might not have that much skin in the stock market game, but the 10% that are doing all of the spending do. The reason they are spending so much in keeping entire industries alive is because they feel wealthy thanks to their booming portfolios. If these asset markets falter, there is not going to be much left to prop everything up, and to use a technical term, we are going to be absolutely fucked. Now, this is normally the point where I would say to put away the tinfoil hats, because this is all the result of broken incentive structures and flaccid regulations, rather than some kind of deeper conspiracy. But the reality is, this all sounds very familiar. In 2006, a series of reports were leaked from Citigroup's asset management team dealing specifically with ultra-high net worth clients. In these reports, they described a plutonymy, a combination of plutocracy and economy where economic growth is powered by and largely consumed by a wealthy few. In a plutonymy, there is no such animal as the US consumer.
That seems like the worst case scenario, I gotta be honest.
Or the UK consumer, or indeed the Russian consumer. There are rich consumers, few in number, but disproportionate in the gigantic income and consumption they take. The rest are the non-rich, the multitudinous many, but only accounting for surprisingly small bites of the national pie. Now, the actual intention of this report was to encourage Citigroup's wealthy clientele to invest in companies that catered exclusively to other wealthy clientele, because the analysts predicted that they would eventually be the only ones worth selling stuff to. And remember, this report was published way back in 2005. Now, Citi has tried really hard to scrape this report off the internet, so I am going to go ahead and leave a link to it below. It's a dense investment thesis, but also genuinely very scary. Now, of course, there is still one way that you matter in the economy, and this report covered that as well. Whilst the rich are getting a greater share of the wealth and the poor a lesser share, political enfranchisement remains as was: one person, one vote. In plain English, the biggest risk to their clients was that votes were somewhat evenly distributed. Fortunately for them, we are really bad at spending them wisely. Go and watch this video next to see just the latest example of people clearly voting against their own best interests, and don't forget to like and subscribe to keep on learning how money works.
There's like a whole lot of political things I could talk about here, but let's save that for another video, a more political type of video. But I do have to say that this was a very good video. Keep saying that word. But I really do think like America is on the verge of something very big and very unfortunate. Most likely like a complete collapse or something like that, because everyone is kind of fed up and the pressure is really just building. It is the case in like the whole world, but especially America. Like, y'all have been getting treated so badly by your rulers, your leaders, and it's not in your best interest at all. What's her name? Nancy Pelosi? Isn't she like one of the biggest, most notorious insider traders? And she's also like the speaker for the House of Representatives. I believe that's correct. I'm not 100% sure. Again, not American, but I believe that is correct. And she is like married to a trader, someone who deals in stocks and stuff, and he just happens to be one of the best traders in the world. Totally not because his wife is like feeding him information. No, that would be insider trading. That's a crime. Of course, no one in like the United States government has committed a crime. Actually, they have, and you should check out my last video about Epstein to see that. Anyway, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Check out his original video down in the description, like I said earlier, and I'll see you in, I guess, Epstein Island.